Sydney, I am very honored to get to talk to you today. Before we dive in, though, is there anything else that you would like our audience to know about you? Anything else from your background that we might have left out?
No, I think you pretty much got it covered. Yeah, I also speak a lot at events. I guess that's a huge thing. So if you need a speaker for anything, but yeah.
Heck yeah, love it. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to dive on into questions. If we can stop sharing the screen, then we will spotlight our video. There we go. Thank you so much for our Power to Fly people behind the scenes. Y'all are doing the real work, making us look good. So thank you so much. All right, Sydney, one of the first things that I wanted to talk about is how, when you talk about creating a neurodiverse-friendly workspace, that has a lot of parts that we want to unpack.
Yes.
So first off, let's talk about how you define neurodiversity.
Yeah, so I define neurodiversity. I actually do talk about my slides, but I'll quickly give you a definition. It describes the way people experience and interact with the world around them and the various different ways that they interact. There's no one right way of thinking, it's no way of learning and behaving, and should be viewed as differences and not deficits.
I think that's wonderful. And I do think it's worth calling out that, prior to, let's say, the last 5 years or so, neurodiversity, at least for most people, just tended to mean things like autism or Asperger's. But yes. I think it is important to recognize that, neurodiversity is a large tent. It's kind of growing as we speak. And so there are a lot of people, people who are dyslexic, honestly, is one of the groups that I honestly hadn't thought about. But once I did, I was like, well, of course, duh.
Well, if I can share my screen in my presentation, I can show you all the different types of neurodiversity. Yeah. Let's see. 1 second. Let's pull it up.
Take your time.
I like making presentations.
Yeah, let's make sure that that Sydney's got presentation ability. There we go.
There you go. So, yeah. Hi everyone, welcome to Creating a Neurodiverse-Friendly Workplace. Like Megan said, I am Sydney Elaine Butler, and my pronouns are they/them. So I'm going to give you a bit of an agenda of what we're going to talk about today, because as a neurodiverse individual, I think it's important to have an agenda and to lay out what to expect. So again, what is neurodiversity? Types of neurodiversity? How to support if you're in the management position? How to support if you're just a coworker? Recruitment, that's a huge area that you need to focus on. Retaining after you recruit these candidates, policies and procedures in the workplace, and then if we have time for a bit of a Q&A. So what is neurodiversity? I already said my definition, but there's some other parts. So neurodiversity is a critical part of diversity that often goes ignored in the workplace, but realizing that it's now, it's more important to focus on neurodiversity in the workplace, but there's still so much work that needs to be done. And even with regards to accessibility. So 1 in 7 people have a neurodivergent condition. It is still the most untapped talent in the labor market, and this goes in hand with people with disabilities, but also within disabilities, it's still the most untapped because of the nature of it being invisible. And employees should be considered for their unique experiences and contributions they offer as an individual, and not just using them as tokenism and using them, hey, we need a neurodiverse candidate, we need, having them at the door, but everyone has something to offer and everyone has the unique skill sets. They just also happen to be neurodivergent. So types of neurodiversity, which we're kind of briefly talking about. So like Meg said, they didn't know this dyslexia was a type of neurodiversity, and there's a lot of other things that people didn't realize was a type of neurodiversity. So this includes sensory integration disorder, ADHD, which is the most common, people know about this, but anxiety is also a type of neurodiversity, OCD, trauma. I'm actually developing a workshop right now about how trauma is a type of neurodiversity and how the trauma of being neurodiverse in itself. And so it's really important to recognize that this is a type of neurodiversity. Then we have dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. So dyslexia is mostly reading, dysgraphia is for writing, and dyscalculia is for math. Mental health issues is a type of neurodiversity, again, because it changes the way your brain thinks, and there's still a lot of stigma around mental health being type of neurodiversity, and there's still a lot of stigma around mental health in general. So when you put them together, there's a lot of stigma, and it's up to the person if they want to say, hey, yeah, I identify as neurodivergent by being bipolar or having PTSD, which I do identify as. But sometimes people are like, I'm just depressed, I'm not neurodiverse, and it's important to understand that they can say what they want and claim that language as they choose. Developmental disabilities, ASD, so autism spectrum disorder or autism, auditory processing, epilepsy, and learning disabilities. These are all types of neurodiversity, and there's so much more than just I included here, and understanding that neurodiversity looks different to everyone. So how can you support if you're in the management position? So foster a relationship between all employees. And you're probably saying that seems like a lot of work, with all your employees, but just having that connection, breaking down, do they need some more support? That allows for creating that culture of more inclusivity and making them feel like they can come to you if they have concerns. If a lot of people are now being diagnosed later in life, or we being like starting to realize within themselves. And so if you foster that relationship when they first start the company, and then when they get this diagnosis and they feel comfortable enough to share it with you, so just fostering that relationship with them. Check in with your employee daily or weekly on the agreed upon basis. If employee needs to be checked in daily, like, hey, how did your task go today? They go, okay, do you need any support? How can I help you? Or weekly, if if they only need weekly support, like, oh, how are your tasks this week? Did they go okay? Even monthly, just work with the individual and understand when you should check in and how frequently you need to check in. And sometimes, it is on a agreed upon basis, but also understanding sometimes that things might change and they're like, hey, can we check in daily? I'm going through something right now, or things change because everything's a spectrum, everything fluctuates and there's variance. So really working with your employee to understand. Listen intently when your employees address their challenges or struggles. A lot of managers think that when their employees are complaining or addressing an issue that they're having, that they're directly complaining about the management style, or they don't like the work environment, but they feel comfortable enough with you to bring it up. That's a huge step, that they felt comfortable enough to bring it to you, and that they think that you would do something about it and make it better for them. And so continue to listen intently to what they're saying, and not what you assume, and see what the actual root of the issue is, and not just assume it's because of something you did, or they're just complaining for the sake of complaining. When somebody is closest to you, take what they say at face value. Don't be, so for example, if an employee is closest to you, that they're autistic, don't be like, oh, I have a nephew that's autistic and he's like 5, nothing like him. Or when they say their experiences and what they have, take them at what they say and what they need from you, not what you assume. Or if you've had other employees that are, again, that are autistic, and don't compare them to the other employee, because everyone's different, not if you're neurodivergent or not. So just take them what they say at face value and work with them to understand. So with that, accommodation. So accommodation looks different for everyone. And then understand that accommodation can look different day to day. So going back to is different for everyone. So like I said, if you know one employee that's autistic, you only know that one employee that's autistic. And so really understand what that person needs to support, the support that person needs in their position, and what they need to be successful in their day-to-day tasks of doing the job. And then understand that it could look different day to day. So for example, someone that has PTSD or complex PTSD, some days they're fine and they're doing okay, but if something triggered them that morning or something impacted them that morning, it could look different that day. They could be more on edge, they could be more hypervigilant, they could be, and they could be more on high alert. So, working with them and, having that space and having that safe space for them to be like, hey, I need a bit more time to do my certain tasks today. I'm not feeling the best, and just going from there. So now as a coworker, so educate yourself. This also goes hand with the management, but as a coworker, educate yourself on neurodiversity and disability, and really understand how it can impact someone, and you talk to them, ask questions. Don't compare them to other people, who experience neurodiversity or disability. Ask them questions, if they feel comfortable, they'll answer your questions, and don't push them if they don't want to answer your questions. But it's a good thing to ask them the questions, because they're the ones that have the lived experience. But it's also valid if they don't want to share that with you at this time, but usually, for me personally, is when you start breaking down those, like, oh, they cared enough to ask that question. Maybe I'll share it with them later when I feel like it, when, they cared enough to ask, and that, can lead to them wanting to have a conversation with you later. Help when a person asks for help. No, and you think they need help. Sometimes you see people struggling, and it's you're empathetic and you want to help them as soon as you can and help them. But ask if they need help. They'll ask if they need help, and if they do need help, and they are struggling, but they'll come to you when they need help. And it's really understanding that, yes, you want to help them and help them succeed, but if they say that no, I'm good right now, let them figure it out, because they obviously want to figure it out themselves. And if they need your help, again, it goes back to the kind of similar to if you ask a question, we're not willing to answer the question, let them be like, oh, that person was offering to help me when I needed help. They saw I needed help. Maybe I'll be more willing to ask them for help next time. And also with that, everyone needs help differently. So, sometimes you think a person needs help in a certain way because you see them struggling in a certain way, but actually it's something else they need. So they're like, oh, they needed more clarification on something beforehand. Now they just don't need you to do it for them. They need more clarification to be able to do it themselves. Help looks different. Do not belittle their struggles. Do not say it's because of the disability they can't do something, or because of their neurodiversity they can't do something. Don't put them in a little box of what you think they can do, what they can't do. And sometimes people can do things and sometimes they can't do things. So like, don't question when they could do it before and they couldn't do it now. Sometimes, because especially you see someone do something, you're like, okay, they can do it, and other times they can't. But like, everyone has good and bad days, and people can do things on some days and people can't do things on other days, because we're all human and we all have our levels of struggle. So recruitment of neurodiverse candidates. This is a huge way to make your workplace more neurodiverse friendly. So starts with an accessible recruitment, interview, and hiring process. You have to understand where your barriers are in your company. Then we go about removing these barriers. It's not just enough to just understand the barriers that exist within your company, but also understanding the importance of removing the barriers and understanding how to go about removing the barriers. Do you need a consultant to come in? Do you need a little bit more support in this area? Which areas do you need more support in? Do you need help with an accommodation statement? Do you need help finding a job boards to find these candidates? So what support do you need? And what barriers? It's like, hey, we are posting on these job boards. We're posting on these same job boards that don't reach out to these candidates. How can we improve? Ensuring your website is up to the WCAG guidelines to ensure accessibility. A lot of websites, they're not up to the accessibility guidelines. And so making sure that your website is accessible and that anyone can view it and access the resources they need on your website. And then again, having that accommodation statement for candidates, what does it actually look like? Where does it go on the job posting? And then with that, making your job postings and use more accessible and inclusive language, not using big company lingo, not using big company industry jargon. Do you really need that in the job posting? A lot of job postings, they have requirements for the job postings, but if you actually look at it, it's more of a nice to have, but they think it's a requirement. Really understanding, is it a really need to have, or is it because we just had it for so long, it's what we need? And so understanding those barriers and make it clear that your company welcomes neurodiverse talent. Have it on the job posting. A lot of employers just say, oh, we're an equal opportunity employer, and that's great, but it's kind of vague and not really saying that you welcome neurodiverse talent. And so with that, posting on those neurodiverse talent job boards, doing your research, making sure that you use that language so that the person sees that you actually are willing to and have put that effort forward. Having inclusive interviews, having closed captions enabled if it's a Zoom interview or a virtual interview. A lot of companies still don't do that. I had a couple of interviews with some companies and they still don't do it. And so I actually have a guide that I sent to them and they appreciated it and they started implementing it into their system. And also having questions, so modifying the questions, repeating questions as needed, so sometimes, giving them that time to answer the questions, giving the questions ahead of time. I usually say giving the questions ahead of time, for everyone, because you never know who's going to need it. We all have busy lives, we're not just all about work. Work is a huge part, but it's not our whole lives. So, having those questions ahead of time. And, if you give someone time to prepare those questions ahead of time, it allows them to relax more. They eases their anxiety. They can, they really know what they're going to say or have an idea what they're going to say. Their personality will shine through more. Their other characteristics will shine through more instead of, just saying what you think they think you want to hear, and, allowing them to actually have that space. So once you actually recruit that talent, how to retain that neurodiverse talent. So have a conversation with your neurodiverse employees, see how it's going for them. Could the things be going better? And I think a lot of times, because companies are still working remote, and that's a huge part of retaining that talent, is it making that more accessible for them. And so having that conversation and you really understanding what is working for them, what's not working for them. Listen intently when the employees speak, actually listen to what they're saying to you and what they want and what they're experiencing in the workplace. And then with this, evaluate your culture towards neurodiverse employees by asking them how they think about the culture. You can, do it in a formal setting, doing it in a survey, understanding, okay, do we need to be more inclusive? Or just asking casually, hey, what do you think about the culture? How do you think about that meeting? How'd it go? Asking them how they feel, depending on how you have that relationship with an employee and how you want to go about doing things. Again, accommodate based on what the employee says they need, not what you assume they need, and really understanding, and then especially in the remote work too, a lot of employers think they don't have to accommodate anymore, or the accommodation can be kind of pushed back unless it's in very serious cases. But even if you're the employee now from working from home can set up the workspace how they want to make it as comfortable as they need, but it's still, as you as the employer still have a duty to accommodate that individual, because you never know what they might need, and then give them the resources they need to be successful. What they say, hey, I think this would make me be more successful, work through it with them, come up with solutions, come up with strategies, come up with and then trying an error, saying, let's try this. This is, so they think this is what I might need. And then you try it and it's not actually working, then get rid of it, and then when you give them the resources to be successful and you accommodate and you validate your culture, it creates a more inclusive culture overall, and more people are going to be retained, and it's actually be beneficial for your company overall. So next, policies and procedures. So evaluate your current policies and procedures. Do they have any barriers, limitations, or any impact on these employees? Does the language that's being used inadvertently impact these employees? Understanding that you might have barriers in place when you have your policies and procedures. It's not part of your own. It happens sometimes. Having diversity, inclusion, and equity policies. And so understanding that the policies promote the representation and participation of different groups of individuals, including people of different ages, races, ethnicities, abilities, disabilities, gender, religions, cultures, and sexual orientations. And so understanding the intersectionality of it all and seeing, is there barriers for these individuals, having these, do we have to have more accommodation statement? Do we have to have accommodation policies? Do we accommodate? Do we have a policy we go about to refer to when we are doing accommodations? Do we have these things in place to make sure that these employees are not discriminated and don't have any barriers in the workplace? Implement that accommodations, is so the clear statement of the organization's commitment to providing an environment that is inclusive and barrier-free, and providing accommodation to the point of undue hardship. So making it clear of what your company's outline is and what is the duty of what is undue hardship look like for your company, and it's like, what is accommodation? And also having an accessibility policy, okay, how could you make things more accessible in your workplace? Having the ability to understand how to make it more accessible in your workplace, and how to make things have more access in your workplace and make it more inclusive to everyone. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much, and let me know if you have any questions. And feel free to reach out to me at my email, accessiblecreates@gmail.com, for more details of how I can help you or your company. Or I'm still developing my website, but it is published at accessiblecreates.ca for more details.
Thank you so much. That was an absolutely great presentation. I was keeping my eye on the chat, tons and tons of love for those slides, especially the first couple really break down with more specificity than I feel like a lot of people, it's more specific information than a lot of people get, especially if you don't know anyone or you don't have a relationship with the neurodiverse community. So I think that's wonderful. We are seeing all kinds of stuff. The first question we got, if you don't mind taking one from the chat, Hey Wolf had asked, how do I ask for interview accommodations for things like time coding challenges? I think this is a really interesting question, right? Because there's a lot of people that might have something that happens in the interview process that an accommodation would help them to show off their skills. So what do you recommend to this person?
I think, when people think of accommodation, they think of getting more time, to begin with. That's what, so I think, because especially in school, when you get accommodation for tests, it's usually you get more time on the test, and, understanding that, going about being like, hey, I want to put my best foot forward, all these things, I need a little bit more time, have the backup, if you need backup support, Say this is why I need more support. I have accessibility needs. You can just say I have accessibility needs and I require more time, and really, I think going about doing that and saying, hey, I just need more time. I have accessibility needs, and if they say, hey, hopefully they'll accept, and if they're like, I don't know, and it's like that's kind of a red flag,
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, this is something we're hearing more and more, especially after, the start of the onset of the Great Recession or Great Resignation, sorry. And so,
Yes.
that is something we hear more and more is this idea of, yeah, the company's interviewing you, but you are interviewing the company just as much. And obviously this comes from a place of privilege or being, sufficiently resourced, but that is absolutely something that I also use kind of as a litmus test of, are they going to be cool with this, or are they going to, not be a place that's going to support my needs? So thank you for touching on that. I think you're right. It might just be as simple as, hey, I have, I see that you've got a timed coding test you want me to do. I have a disability and we need a couple accommodations for that. Is that something we can discuss? I think that's
just even be open to having that conversation, and like you said, like you're now interviewing the company too. It's a lot of people before the pandemic, before all this, everyone's like, no, I just the company's interviewing me. It's like, no, it's a two-way street.
Yeah, 100%. Becca had chimed in asking, how would a workplace find out that someone needed an accessible interview, or should all interviews assume that somebody might be neurodivergent? I think this is a really good question, right? Because I feel like a lot of times when people think about disabilities or disorders, they think visual, they think what they can see in front of them. So what would you recommend if you are in hiring and are not sure, or don't want to assume either way? What would you recommend hiring managers do to kind of make it more clear if such accommodations are available? Is there something people should be doing?
Yeah. So
be doing?
have on your job posting, having that accommodation statement, and having that, like, hey, this is who you reach out to if you need accommodation at any time during the hiring process, and actually, checking that email and having that email actually work, that person respond to those emails. Because I've heard a lot of cases where you have an accessibility email for the company, but they don't actually check it or they don't use it. So actually utilizing that email, or having just the HR specialist or having the HR person that wants to take on that task, do that. And then with that, when you actually ask someone for the interview, I actually at my job last summer, I was like, have that again, remind them if you need accommodation during the interview, this is who you contact. And have they read in the email when you invite them to the interview. So like, hey, it's as they're going through the interview invitation, they say, hey, they still are gonna accommodate me. And when they say that, they're like, okay, I need accommodation, and just type it in the email back. This is what I need, and having that in the email when you invite them for every interview invitation, because you never know who's going to need it. So just having a template in your interview invite template, have that saying, hey, if you need accommodation still during the interview process, let us know what you need. So it's like when you confirm you're available for the interview, just send back, yes, I need closed captions enabled, I need ASL interpreter, just having that conversation.
No, I think that's a very good point. It's very similar if you want to stick with the visible differences metaphor. Just because you don't have an employee at your office who uses a wheelchair, who might need ramp access, that doesn't mean you don't provide that. It doesn't mean you don't think ahead to the fact that you might have somebody someday that needs that. So developing these plans, or at least familiarizing your company or your leaders with this possibility or these accommodations would be huge. A lot of people had wanted to know if you have any guides or resources that you recommend for creating an accommodation plan. I loved how you said that, accommodations can vary from day to day for each individual. Like there's times where I absolutely need an extra hour to get stuff done. There are other days where like you can throw 8 tasks at me at once and I am great. So, when it comes to trying to form these plans, do you have resources or anything you recommend? Are there, guidelines?
Yeah, so I have a template that if you send me an email at the email I provided, but really understanding, there's also a lot of great resources online you can find. But this, being kind of more like a contingency plan. Like this is the main accommodation I need. If you need accommodations daily, it's also like this is what like on bad days, for lack of a better word, because everyone has good and bad days. But on my days that I have a flare up or I have an episode, you know, this is what to do. This is the accommodation I need on those days, and having that episodic accommodation and accessibility plan.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. All right. So one of the things that we talked about is, or one of the things you had mentioned was microaggressions in the workplace and what that looks like, how it can be avoided. I want this to be the last question we answer. I'm sorry, y'all, because I know we had tons of great ones. But let's talk about those microaggressions. What are some of them and how can people avoid making them?
Yeah, so a lot of the microaggressions, I kind of touched upon it in my presentation, but you know, it's like assuming someone can't do something because of their neurodiversity or the disability. You know, it's like, well, you're autistic, or you're, you know, all these things that you can't do that because they, you know, treating them like they're kids. It's like, I'm an adult, you know, I have a job, I'm at the same company as you are, we're all here to do a job, you know, being so, you know, and watching your biases. It's like, okay, do I have any bias towards people that are autistic? Why do I have these biases? Really checking yourself before you know, and then really understanding that the person's in the position for a reason, and understanding that they are capable, you know, sometimes they might need a little bit more support, but they're capable, and that's why they're in this position, and just checking yourself. And also ableism. I talk about ableism in my workshops if anyone's interested, but ableism is a huge issue that, you know, goes hand in hand with microaggressions. And so researching and learning about ableism is very important.
Excellent. Oh, love this. All right. So in the minute we have left, I just want to say, Sydney, thank you so much. It has been really wonderful to kind of kick off today's summit track by speaking with you. Is there anything else that you want our audience to know before we jump today?
I think I'm good. If you have any questions though, feel free to message me at my email.